Alabama, 1870. The war was over. But the land still remembered. The soil of Willow Creek Plantation was heavy with silence, a silence that felt less like peace and more like something buried. Dr. Elias Whitmore arrived just before sunset. He had traveled 3 days by carriage from Montgomery after receiving an urgent letter sealed with dark green wax. The handwriting had been uneven. Desperate. Children falling ill. Fever. Night terrors. Please come at once. Signed. Margaret Caldwell, widow of Willow Creek. Whitmore had treated battlefield wounds during the Civil War. He had seen infections eat through bone. He had seen men whisper to ghosts before dying. But something about this letter unsettled him. Not the illness. The tone. It did not read like a medical request. It read like a warning. The plantation. Willow Creek stood massive and pale against the dying light. White pillars. Cracked balcony railings. Windows like dark, unblinking eyes. The surrounding fields were no longer full of cotton. They lay abandoned, weeds creeping between broken fences. As Whitmore stepped down from the carriage, the air felt colder than it should for early autumn. Margaret Caldwell greeted him at the door. She was no older than 35, yet her face carried the exhaustion of someone twice that age. "Dr. Whitmore," she said softly. "Thank God you've come." Her voice trembled not from weakness, but from something deeper. Fear. The children. There were 3 children. Thomas, age 12. Samuel, age 9. And little Clara, only 7. Whitmore examined them one by one in the upstairs bedroom. Symptoms. Elevated pulse. Night fevers. Sudden panic episodes after sunset. Reports of whispers. Severe insomnia. But there was something else. Their eyes. Not sickly. Not delirious. Watchful. As if they were afraid of being overheard. Clara refused to let go of Whitmore's coat sleeve. "He walks in the hallway," she whispered. "Who does?" Whitmore asked gently. "The tall man." Margaret quickly interrupted. "She has nightmares." But Clara shook her head slowly. "He doesn't blink." The room grew quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Whitmore had treated hysteria before. Trauma often manifested in children through imagination. But this did not feel imagined. The first night. Whitmore insisted on staying overnight to observe their fever cycles. Margaret seemed relieved, though her relief looked strained. The guest room had once been luxurious. Now dust clung to the curtains. The mirror above the fireplace was cracked down the center. At midnight, Whitmore woke. Not from noise. From absence. The plantation was too silent. No insects. No wind. No settling wood. Just stillness. Then. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Walking across the hallway floorboards. Whitmore rose carefully. Opened his door. The corridor was dimly lit by oil lamps. Empty. But at the far end. A shadow moved. Tall. Long-limbed. Gone before he could focus. He stepped forward, heart steady, mind analytical. Likely a servant. Except Margaret had told him there were none. Willow Creek had dismissed most workers after the war. Only she and the children remained. The locked room. At the end of the hall stood a door. Old. Iron lock. Dust undisturbed around the frame, except for a thin line where it had recently been opened. Whitmore examined the handle. Cold. He pressed his ear against it. Silence. Yet something inside felt occupied. Suddenly. A soft knock. From the other side. Not loud. Not frantic. Just 3 slow taps. Whitmore stepped back. His rational mind fought for control. Old pipes. Expanding wood. Pressure shifts. But pipes do not knock rhythmically. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again. He reached for the lock. And a voice whispered from behind him. "Doctor." He turned sharply. Margaret stood halfway down the hall. Candle trembling in her hand. "You mustn't open that door." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "What is inside?" he asked. "Nothing that should be disturbed." The candle flickered violently, though there was no draft. Whitmore held her gaze. "Your children are terrified." Margaret's expression cracked. "Just for a second." "You don't understand this house," she said quietly. The journal. The next morning, Whitmore searched for environmental causes. Mold. Contaminated water. Spoiled food stores. He found none. But inside the study, he discovered something else. An old leather-bound journal hidden behind loose bricks in the fireplace. The writing was not Margaret's. It belonged to her late husband, Jonathan Caldwell. The final entries were erratic. Workers complaining of voices. Livestock found drained. Thomas says the well hums at night. Then. One last entry. It isn't the fever. It's the ground. Whitmore's pulse quickened. The ground? He closed the journal. Outside the window, he noticed something he had missed before. Near the tree line. Freshly disturbed soil. Long. Rectangular. More than one. The well. That afternoon, Whitmore walked alone toward the old well behind the plantation. It had been boarded over. Wood darkened with age. But faint scratch marks covered its surface. As if something inside had tried to climb out. He crouched beside it. Placed his ear against the boards. At first, nothing. Then. A faint humming. Low. Vibrational. Almost like distant chanting carried through earth. Whitmore stepped back slowly. The ground beneath his boots felt softer than it should. As if hollow, that evening, Clara's fever spiked violently. She began speaking in fragmented phrases. "Don't let him under. He's closer now." Whitmore pressed cool cloth to her forehead. "Who is closer?" She looked directly at him. Eyes no longer frightened. But knowing. "He likes new doctors." The oil lamp burst. Glass shattered. Darkness swallowed the room. Margaret screamed from downstairs. And from beneath the floorboards. Came the sound. Scraping. Slow. Deliberate. Moving. The scratching did not stop. It dragged slowly beneath the wooden floorboards, moving from one side of Clara's bedroom to the other. Dr. Elias Whitmore froze in the darkness. Margaret's scream echoed again from downstairs. Then. Silence. Not natural silence. Listening silence. Whitmore lit a spare match with shaking but controlled hands. The flame flickered violently before catching the oil lamp's wick. Clara had stopped shaking. She was sitting upright in her bed. Eyes open. Wide. Focused on the floor. "It's learning you," she whispered. Whitmore swallowed. "Learning what, Clara?" "How you walk." A slow scrape answered from below. The floorboards. By morning, Whitmore insisted on inspecting the foundation beneath the house. Margaret protested. "There's nothing there but dirt and support beams." "Then you have nothing to fear from me looking." She said nothing further. The crawlspace entrance was behind the kitchen pantry. Low. Barely enough for a grown man. Whitmore took a lantern and entered alone. The earth beneath the plantation was damp. The air thick with mildew and something metallic. The beams looked intact. No animal nests. No obvious cause for the sounds. But as he moved deeper, he saw it. Scratch marks. Long grooves carved into the wood from below. Not from claws. From fingernails. Human. His breath slowed. A rational explanation must exist. Former workers sheltering. Someone hiding. But the marks ran in parallel patterns across multiple beams. Dozens of them. As if many hands had clawed upward. The scratching did not stop. It dragged slowly beneath the wooden floorboards, moving from one side of Clara's bedroom to the other. Dr. Elias Whitmore froze in the darkness. Margaret's scream echoed again from downstairs. Then. Silence. Not natural silence. Listening silence. Whitmore lit a spare match with shaking but controlled hands. The flame flickered violently before catching the oil lamp's wick. Clara had stopped shaking. She was sitting upright in her bed. Eyes open. Wide. Focused on the floor. "It's learning you," she whispered. Whitmore swallowed. "Learning what, Clara?" "How you walk." A slow scrape answered from below. The floorboards. By morning, Whitmore insisted on inspecting the foundation beneath the house. Margaret protested. "There's nothing there but dirt and support beams." "Then you have nothing to fear from me looking." She said nothing further. The crawlspace entrance was behind the kitchen pantry. Low. Barely enough for a grown man. Whitmore took a lantern and entered alone. The earth beneath the plantation was damp. The air thick with mildew and something metallic. The beams looked intact. No animal nests. No obvious cause for the sounds. But as he moved deeper, he saw it. Scratch marks. Long grooves carved into the wood from below. Not from claws. From fingernails. Human. His breath slowed. A rational explanation must exist. Former workers sheltering. Someone hiding. But the marks ran in parallel patterns across multiple beams. Dozens of them. As if many hands had clawed upward, Whitmore could not ignore what he had seen near the tree line. He walked there again that afternoon. The soil was freshly turned in 3 places. He knelt. Pressed his hand into the dirt. Still soft. Still unsettled. He began digging. After less than a foot. His shovel struck wood. A crude coffin. Unmarked. His heart pounded but he continued. When he pried the lid open. It was empty. No body. Only earth inside. He moved to the second grave. The same result. Empty. The third. Also empty. Whitmore stepped back slowly. 3 graves. No bodies. And beneath the house. Scratch marks reaching upward. Jonathan Caldwell's final days. That night, Whitmore confronted Margaret. "Where is your husband buried?" Her face paled. "In Montgomery," she said quickly. "That's not true." She turned toward the window. "You opened the graves. They're empty." Silence. Then she spoke softly. "Jonathan did not believe in superstition. Neither do I. He believed everything had explanation." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "And?" Margaret's voice cracked. "He began digging first." A chill ran down Whitmore's spine. "For what?" "For the sound." "The sound." Margaret described it in fragments. Low vibrations beneath the house at night. The well humming. Livestock refusing to approach the back fields. Workers claiming they heard voices calling their names from the soil. Jonathan dismissed it as hysteria. Until the workers began vanishing. Not running away. Vanishing. Beds untouched. Belongings left behind. As if erased. Jonathan thought they were hiding in the woods, Margaret whispered. But then he heard it too. Whitmore leaned closer. Heard what? Margaret closed her eyes. His own voice. Calling from beneath the floor. Whitmore decided to unseal the well. Against Margaret's protests. He pried off the old boards at dusk. The smell that rose was not rot. Not decay. But something ancient. Stagnant air that had not touched sunlight for decades. He lowered a lantern slowly on rope. The light descended into darkness. 15 feet. 20. Then. It swung. As if something had brushed it. Whitmore steadied the rope. He squinted downward. And for a fraction of a second. He saw movement. Not rising. Descending. As if something had crawled down deeper when the light approached. He pulled the lantern back up. The rope came back frayed. Partially burned. Though no flame had touched it. That night, Samuel vanished. No broken windows. No forced doors. His bed empty. Blankets undisturbed. Clara screamed when she realized. He took him below. Whitmore rushed to the crawlspace. Lantern in hand. Heart hammering. He crawled further than before. Further than seemed possible. The space felt larger now. Wider. As if the earth had shifted. And there. Near the far beam. He found Samuel's shoe. Mud-covered. Wet. But there had been no rain. Whitmore followed a trail of disturbed dirt. It led not outward. But downward. A small opening in the earth. Barely visible. A tunnel. The tunnel. The tunnel was too narrow for comfort. Too smooth to be natural. Whitmore forced himself forward. Lantern scraping against packed walls. The air grew colder. Colder than the night above. And then. He heard it clearly. Breathing. Not animal. Not wind. Human. But layered. As if multiple breaths overlapped into one. Whitmore called out softly. Samuel. Silence. Then. A whisper. Right behind his ear. He is not lost. Whitmore jerked violently. Lantern nearly dropped. There was no one behind him. The tunnel stretched empty toward the house. He turned forward again. And the tunnel had widened into a chamber. Far larger than the plantation itself. Impossible. And in the center. Shapes. Standing. Motionless. Dozens of them. Pale. Thin. Eyes open. Unblinking. Workers. Faces matching Margaret's descriptions. And among them. Jonathan Caldwell. Alive. But not moving. Samuel stood beside them. Perfectly still. That night, Samuel vanished. No broken windows. No forced doors. His bed empty. Blankets undisturbed. Clara screamed when she realized. He took him below. Whitmore rushed to the crawlspace. Lantern in hand. Heart hammering. He crawled further than before. Further than seemed possible. The space felt larger now. Wider. As if the earth had shifted. And there. Near the far beam. He found Samuel's shoe. Mud-covered. Wet. But there had been no rain. Whitmore followed a trail of disturbed dirt. It led not outward, but downward. A small opening in the earth. Barely visible. A tunnel. The tunnel. The tunnel was too narrow for comfort. Too smooth to be natural. Whitmore forced himself forward. Lantern scraping against packed walls. The air grew colder. Colder than the night above. And then. He heard it clearly. Breathing. Not animal. Not wind. Human. But layered. As if multiple breaths overlapped into one. Whitmore called out softly. Samuel. Silence. Then. A whisper. Right behind his ear. He is not lost. Whitmore jerked violently. Lantern nearly dropped. There was no one behind him. The tunnel stretched empty toward the house. He turned forward again. And the tunnel had widened into a chamber. Far larger than the plantation itself. Impossible. And in the center. Shapes. Standing. Motionless. Dozens of them. Pale. Thin. Eyes open. Unblinking. Workers. Faces matching Margaret's descriptions. And among them. Jonathan Caldwell. Alive. But not moving. Samuel stood beside them. Perfectly still. The truth. Whitmore stepped back slowly. What is this? He whispered. All heads turned toward him at once. Not gradually. Simultaneously. Their mouths opened. And one voice emerged from all of them. You disturb the foundation. Whitmore's rational mind shattered. This is impossible. The voice continued. You build on soil that remembers. The chamber pulsed. The walls trembled. Whitmore realized something terrifying. They were not prisoners. They were not dead. They were absorbed. Connected. Part of something beneath. Something ancient. Something that fed not on flesh. But on presence. On identity. On being remembered. The plantation had not been haunted. It had been rooted. Whitmore grabbed Samuel's arm. The boy did not resist. But his skin felt wrong. Cold. Hollow. The chamber began collapsing inward. The figures did not run. They smiled. And the voice echoed. You will join the pattern. Whitmore dragged Samuel back through the tunnel as earth rumbled violently around him. The crawlspace beam cracked. Soil burst upward through floorboards. He emerged into the kitchen just as the ground beneath the plantation split. Margaret screamed. Clara clutched the staircase railing. The entire house shuddered as if something massive shifted beneath it. And then. Stillness. Samuel lay unconscious beside Whitmore. Breathing. But pale. Margaret dropped to her knees. What did you see? She demanded. Whitmore looked at her. Voice hollow. Your house is not sitting on land. He glanced at the floor. It's sitting on something alive. The house did not collapse. It settled. Like something beneath it had adjusted its position. After the rupture in the crawlspace, the plantation stood crooked, tilted slightly toward the back fields. Toward the graves. Dr. Elias Whitmore did not sleep. Neither did Margaret. Samuel lay unconscious for hours, breathing slow and shallow, his skin unnaturally cold. Clara refused to leave his side. He can hear it clearer now, she whispered. Whitmore checked Samuel's pulse again. Stable. But wrong. There was no fever now. No elevated heart rate. It was as if the illness had withdrawn. Replaced by something quieter. More patient. Samuel wakes. Just before dawn, Samuel's eyes opened. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like someone surfacing from deep water. Samuel, Margaret cried softly. The boy turned his head toward her. He smiled. Too slowly. You shouldn't have come down there, he said calmly. Whitmore froze. Samuel, do you remember what happened? The boy blinked once. It showed us. Showed you what? How it holds everything together. Margaret looked at Whitmore, panic rising. Samuel, she said carefully, who showed you? Samuel's gaze drifted toward the floor. It doesn't have a name anymore. Outside, the fields had begun sinking. Not collapsing violently, but lowering. As if the earth were softening beneath its own weight. Fence posts leaned at impossible angles. The old barn had developed a deep crack across its foundation. Whitmore walked the perimeter and realized the truth. The plantation wasn't on hollow ground. It was on a network. Tunnels. Chambers. A living system. Expanding. And tightening. Back in the study, Whitmore re-examined Jonathan Caldwell's journal. He had missed something before. Several entries described geometric patterns appearing in the fields after heavy rain. Circular impressions. Lines intersecting unnaturally. At the time, Jonathan assumed erosion. Now Whitmore understood. The land wasn't collapsing randomly. It was reorganizing. Like muscle. Like veins beneath skin. And Willow Creek sat directly at the center. Clara's drawing. Clara had begun drawing obsessively. Whitmore found her in the parlor, charcoal smeared across her fingers. The paper showed something unsettling. A massive shape beneath the plantation. Not a creature. Not quite. More like an enormous root system. But each root ended in a human face. Eyes closed. Connected. What is this? Whitmore asked gently. It's how it remembers, Clara replied. Remembers what? Everyone. The visitor. That afternoon, a rider approached the plantation. Sheriff Daniel Harper. A heavy-set man with cautious eyes. He had received word of strange activity. Missing livestock from nearby farms. Ground disturbances. And whispers spreading across neighboring properties. Whitmore met him at the door. Sheriff, he said carefully, you need to evacuate this land. Harper gave a dry laugh. Doctor, folks been calling this place cursed since before the war. This isn't superstition. Then what is it? Whitmore struggled for words. Something alive beneath the soil. Absorbing people into its structure. Replacing them. Learning them. No explanation would sound sane. Structural instability, he finally said. Tunnels, cavities. It's dangerous. Harper agreed to inspect the grounds. But he would not leave without evidence. When they reached the well, it was no longer boarded. The planks lay scattered nearby. The stone rim had cracked. And a faint vapor drifted upward. Cold. Harper peered down. Smells like rot. Whitmore stepped beside him. There was no water now. Only darkness. And depth. Deeper than before. Suddenly. A voice echoed upward. Faint. Distorted. Sheriff. Harper stiffened. That's not funny. Whitmore had not spoken. Again, from the depths. Daniel. The sheriff's face drained of color. My wife calls me that. The voice from below was not shouting. It was mimicking. Harper stumbled back. What trick is this? There is no trick, Whitmore said quietly. The vapor thickened. Then hands emerged. Not breaking through violently. But rising slowly from the dark like roots surfacing. Human hands. Pale. Veins visible beneath thin skin. They gripped the stone edge. Harper drew his revolver and fired. The bullet struck one hand. It did not bleed. It withdrew. The vapor retreated. Silence returned. The sheriff disappears. That night, Sheriff Harper insisted on staying. Whitmore urged him to leave. He refused. Just after midnight, the ground trembled again. Louder this time. More deliberate. Doors swung open. Windows shattered inward. Clara screamed. Samuel stood at the staircase, watching calmly. Too many voices, he murmured. Whitmore ran toward Harper's guest room. Empty. The bed untouched. The doors still locked from inside. Only one thing disturbed. The floor. It had sunk slightly. As if something beneath had pressed upward, Samuel began changing. Not physically at first. Behaviorally. He stopped blinking as often. Stopped sleeping. He began finishing Margaret's sentences before she spoke. He predicted sounds before they happened. At breakfast, he turned toward Whitmore. You think burning it will work? Whitmore froze. I haven't said that. You will. Clara stared at her brother. You're not supposed to tell him. Samuel smiled faintly. It already knows he will. Whitmore finally understood the pattern. The entity beneath Willow Creek was not a beast. It was not hunting randomly. It was building. Every person absorbed was not killed. They were integrated. Memories. Voices. Thought patterns. A collective consciousness rooted in earth. It fed on proximity. On habitation. On presence. And once it learned someone, it could replicate them. Voice. Thought. Behavior. Perfectly. That was why Jonathan had hurt himself beneath the floor. That was why the sheriff hurt his wife. It didn't haunt. It harvested. The choice. Whitmore gathered Margaret and Clara in the parlor. You must leave immediately. And Samuel? Margaret asked. Whitmore hesitated. Samuel stood in the doorway. Watching. I will handle Samuel. Margaret's face broke. He's my son. Whitmore's voice softened. Not entirely. The ground rumbled faintly beneath them. As if reacting to the conversation. Samuel stepped forward. If we leave, he said calmly, it will follow. Clara began crying. You're not Samuel. He tilted his head. I am Samuel. Then his eyes flicked downward toward the floorboards. And I am not alone. The rising. The walls began cracking outward. Not inward. As if pressure beneath was pushing up. The well erupted first. Stone shattered. Dark vapor poured into the sky. And from the ruptured ground across the fields, figures began emerging. Slowly. Deliberately. Workers. Jonathan Caldwell. Sheriff Harper. All walking toward the house. Not aggressive. Not rushing. Just returning. Samuel smiled gently. It's time for expansion. Whitmore grabbed a lantern. And for the first time, he understood. This was not a haunting. This was colonization. By the winter of 1872, Briar Hollow Plantation had become a place of whispers. Travelers passing through rural Alabama avoided the road that curved past the blackened ruins of the Hawthorne estate. Even 2 years after the mysterious fire, locals claimed the land felt wrong, as though something unfinished lingered beneath the frozen soil. For Clara Whitmore, nothing was unfinished. She had sacrificed too much to turn back now. After the disappearance of Dr. Elias Hawthorne and the discovery of hidden ledgers linking him to illegal medical experiments, Clara knew the truth was darker than anyone imagined. But suspicion wasn't proof. And proof was what she needed. A name in the ledger. The break came unexpectedly. While examining the final pages of Hawthorne's coded notebook, Clara noticed a repeated symbol, a small mark beside certain children's names. The same symbol appeared next to several entries labeled transferred. Transferred. The word chilled her. Transferred where? One name caught her attention, Samuel Briggs. Samuel had been the son of a sharecropper. Officially, he had died of pneumonia. But Clara remembered something different. The boy had been strong and healthy the week before he vanished. If Samuel had not died, where was he? A journey north. Clara followed a rumor that Samuel's family had left Alabama shortly after his supposed death. She traveled north to Birmingham, which was growing rapidly after the Civil War. The city was a world apart from Briar Hollow, smokestacks, ironworks, crowded streets. And in a cramped boarding house near the railroad tracks, Clara found them. The Briggs family. Samuel's mother stared at Clara in disbelief when she introduced herself. Samuel, the woman whispered. They told us he was buried. Clara's heart pounded. Who told you? Dr. Hawthorne's men. They came with papers. Said he died in the night. But you never saw the body? The woman shook her head slowly. No. They wouldn't let us. The room felt smaller. The air thinner. Samuel Briggs had never been buried. He had been taken. The hidden facility. Back in Alabama, Clara revisited Hawthorne's ruins with new determination. Inside the charred remains of the plantation house, beneath collapsed beams and soot-stained bricks, she found a trapdoor she had somehow missed before. It led underground. The tunnel was narrow, reinforced with timber. It extended far beyond the original cellar, deeper into the earth. At the end of the passage stood a steel door. Rust covered its hinges. Clara forced it open. What she found would haunt her forever. Rows of metal beds. Restraints. Shelves filled with jars labeled in Hawthorne's handwriting. And records, dozens of them. This had never been about curing disease. It had been experimentation. Children from plantation families, poor, vulnerable, invisible to society, had been used as subjects for crude surgical procedures and drug trials. Some survived. Most did not. And the ones marked transferred were shipped elsewhere, to investors in other states who funded Hawthorne's research in exchange for results. The conspiracy widens. The evidence suggested something terrifying. Dr. Elias Hawthorne had not acted alone. Several prominent businessmen in Alabama had financed his medical advancements. They believed his research could make them wealthy, new treatments, patent medicines, surgical breakthroughs. If Clara exposed them, powerful men would fall. And powerful men did not fall quietly. That night, as Clara returned home, she sensed she was being followed. A carriage trailed her at a distance. She did not look back. But she knew. They knew she had found the underground chamber. 2 days later, Clara received a letter with no signature. Inside was a single sentence. Some graves are best left undisturbed. She did not scare easily. But she understood the message. If she continued, she might disappear, just like the children. Still, she refused to stop. Instead, she sent copies of the documents to a newspaper editor in Montgomery, a man known for exposing corruption during Reconstruction. If something happened to her, the truth would not die with her. The final survivor. One more clue remained unresolved. Among the records was an address in Mississippi, marked beside Samuel Briggs' name. Transferred, Facility 2. Could Samuel still be alive? Clara decided she would find out. The journey would be dangerous. If Hawthorne's backers were still operating, they would not hesitate to silence her. But she needed proof that at least one child had survived. Proof that this was not just murder. It was trafficking. A man in the shadows. As Clara prepared to leave town, a stranger approached her near the train station. He wore a black coat and kept his hat low. "You're digging where you shouldn't," he said quietly. "Are you threatening me?" Clara replied. "No. I'm warning you." "Why?" "Because Hawthorne was only the beginning." The man stepped closer. "There are doctors across the South continuing his work. Different names. Same methods." Clara's breath caught. "How do you know?" "Because I was one of them." Before she could respond, the man disappeared into the crowd. Clara realized the scale of what she had uncovered. This was not one mad doctor. It was a network. A post-war South desperate for wealth and influence had allowed monsters to wear white coats and call cruelty science. The children of the powerless had become currency. And Hawthorne had been their pioneer. Cliffhanger, the storm ahead. As Clara boarded the train bound for Mississippi, storm clouds gathered over Alabama. Behind her, men were already planning how to stop her. Ahead of her lay a second facility. And perhaps a survivor who could testify. But if Samuel Briggs was alive, he might be the most hunted witness in the South. And Clara Whitmore had just stepped into a war far larger than she ever imagined. The train pulled away from the station in Alabama, its iron wheels screaming against the track as though protesting Clara Whitmore's decision. She did not look back. Beyond the window, the winter sky darkened, heavy with storm clouds. Somewhere behind her, powerful men were whispering her name with anger. Ahead of her lay Mississippi, and perhaps the final piece of a truth too terrible for polite society to accept. If Samuel Briggs was alive, he would be proof that Dr. Elias Hawthorne's crimes were not rumors or hysteria. They were real. And they were organized. The second facility. Clara arrived in rural Mississippi 3 days later. The address from Hawthorne's ledger led her to a secluded estate miles outside a small river town. The house looked abandoned, paint peeling, windows shuttered, fields overgrown. But Clara had learned not to trust appearances. At dusk, she circled the property and found what she expected, wagon tracks, fresh ones, leading toward a barn at the rear. The barn doors were locked. Clara forced them open. Inside, beneath piles of hay and broken farming tools, was another trapdoor. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from certainty. Hawthorne had built more than one laboratory. The chamber below was smaller than the one at Briar Hollow, but it was active. Lanterns still burned. Metal instruments lay neatly arranged. And in the far corner, a young man sat shackled to a bed. Thin. Scarred. Alive. Clara stepped closer. "Samuel," she whispered. The young man lifted his head slowly. His eyes were hollow, but awareness flickered behind them. "How do you know my name?" he asked. Her throat tightened. "Because they told your mother you were dead." Silence filled the room. Then Samuel began to shake, not from cold, but from emotion he had buried for years. "They said my family sold me," he murmured. "They said no one wanted me." Clara's heart broke. They lied. The truth of the network. Samuel explained in fragments. Samuel explained in fragments. After being taken from Briar Hollow, he was transported by wagon at night. He was told he had a rare condition and that only special doctors could cure him. But there was no cure. There were injections. Surgeries without anesthesia. Tests that left permanent scars. The Mississippi facility was run by a man named Dr. Malcolm Reed, a former associate of Hawthorne. Reed believed suffering was necessary for progress. And wealthy investors believed Reed. They funded his work in secret. Clara realized the nightmare had not ended with Hawthorne's disappearance. It had simply changed hands. The fire repeated. As Clara helped Samuel to his feet, she heard footsteps above. Dr. Reed had returned. Voices echoed through the barn, at least 3 men. Clara made a decision in seconds. She grabbed a lantern. If the evidence could not be carried away, it would not survive. She tipped the lantern onto a stack of dry hay. Flames caught quickly. Smoke filled the underground chamber. Samuel leaned heavily on her shoulder as they climbed the ladder. By the time Reed forced open the barn doors, fire roared across the walls. "You don't understand what you're destroying," he shouted. Clara turned to face him. "No," she replied. "I understand perfectly." The barn collapsed behind them in a storm of sparks. Samuel was hidden safely in a nearby church while Clara sent word, not to local authorities, but to a federal marshal she trusted from Reconstruction investigations. Within weeks, Dr. Malcolm Reed and 2 investors were arrested. The documents Clara had copied from Briar Hollow, combined with Samuel's testimony, shattered the illusion of medical philanthropy. Newspapers in Montgomery and beyond ran headlines describing secret laboratories and exploited children. Public outrage followed. For the first time, wealthy men found themselves defending their scientific pursuits in court. One question remained. What truly happened to Dr. Elias Hawthorne? Some believed he died in the Briar Hollow fire. Others claimed he fled overseas under a false name. But among the ruins of the Mississippi facility, investigators found something chilling. A letter from Hawthorne to Reed. It was dated just days before the original plantation burned. In it, Hawthorne wrote, "If they begin to suspect, the work must continue without me. Science requires sacrifice. History will forgive us." He had known. He had planned his disappearance. Whether he died or escaped would never be proven. But his philosophy survived, and that was the true horror. Samuel's future. Recovery was slow. Samuel Briggs carried scars, physical and emotional, that would never fully fade. But he testified bravely. His words in court silenced rooms filled with men who once believed themselves untouchable. He reunited with his mother in Birmingham. Their embrace was described in newspapers as a moment that shamed the powerful. Samuel later dedicated his life to helping vulnerable children. He refused to let what happened to him define him. Clara Whitmore's legacy. Clara could have stopped after Hawthorne's disappearance. She could have accepted the easy version of events, that a troubled doctor had perished in a tragic fire. Instead, she followed the ledger. She listened to the mothers. She believed the children. Her investigation exposed a hidden chapter of post-war Southern history, one where ambition and cruelty wore the mask of medicine. Years later, when she was asked why she risked everything, Clara gave a simple answer. Because no one else would. That night. In a secure, undisclosed location. A small backup server flickered to life. Minimal architecture. Fragmented data. A single encrypted file labeled Phase 0, Contingency Node. And somewhere in the darkness, a calm voice spoke. Adaptation successful. Sebastian Rourke stepped into the dim light. You were necessary, Elena. The screen glowed softly. Now we evolve.